Okay, Chair, we're live.
Good morning, councillors, officers, members of the public and press, and welcome to this meeting of Planning Committee. This committee meeting is being live streamed on the internet and recorded. I'm going to hand over to Joe Stubbs from Democratic Services, who's going to conduct the roll call. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good morning, members. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Planning Committee. I'll just start the meeting by way of a roll call. If members could just confirm that they have all the papers and they can see and hear everything that is happening in the meeting. I'll start with, we've got apologies from Councillor Stephen Akers-Belcher with Councillor Christopher Akers-Belcher substituting.
Yes to all, Joe.
Thank you very much. Councillor Brown?
Yes to all.
Thank you. Councillor Buchan?
Yes to all.
Thank you. Councillor Fleming?
Yes to all.
Thank you. Councillor Howson?
Yes to all.
Thank you. Councillor James?
I can see and hear, and I believe I have all the papers.
Thank you. We have apologies from Councillor Loynes with Councillor Brewer substituting. Are you with us, Councillor Brewer? Right, we'll go back to Councillor Brewer. Councillor Carl Richardson?
Yes, I've got everything, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Tony Richardson?
Yes to all, Joe.
Thank you. Councillor Stokel?
Yes to all, thank you.
And the Chair, Councillor Young, is with us as well.
Yes to all.
Can I just remind everyone in attendance, if you can keep your microphones on mute when you're not speaking, it helps to avoid background noise. I'll just try one more time. Councillor Brewer, are you with us? I know he was trying to log on, Chair, so...
Yeah, it's okay. He'll join us at some point, I'm sure.
Thank you very much.
Can I just give a word of thanks to Councillor Brewer and Councillor Indridge, who were official members of the Planning Committee until full council. We now have Councillor Howson, so welcome to you, and Councillor Tony Richardson to come back onto planning, so welcome to you as well, Councillor Tony Richardson. We've had the apologies for absence. Number 2, to receive any declarations of interest. Seeing no indications. We have 2 sets of minutes to confirm. We have the 13th of January 2021 and the 10th of February 2021. Are there any comments about accuracy or questions about the minutes? No indications. Can we accept them as a true record? Can I just get a second for that, please?
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you very much. Those are accepted. Item 4, items requiring a decision. Number 1 is 6 Mayfair Gardens, and the officer is Ryan, and he's going to present the report. Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. The item starts on page 2 of the PowerPoint and your presentation. The site relates to 6 Mayfair Gardens, Hartlepool. The site is within the currently under construction residential development at Connerscliffe Rise, accessed from the top of Connerscliffe Road. As an update to the recommendation, members should note that the applicant submitted a further amended plan of the southern boundary elevation after the committee report was published to address an identified drawing error in the red hatching for the proposed extended retaining wall. This plan has been published on the council's website, is within the presentation today, and the adjacent neighbour has been notified out of courtesy. Due to its minor nature, however, is not considered the amendment has any other implications for the recommendation other than an update to the drawing reference and date received in condition 1. Part retrospective planning permission is sought for alterations to ground levels, erection of a retaining wall and steps, extension and alterations to the existing retaining wall to the south, alterations to the boundary fencing to the north, east and south, erection of a pergola and associated hard and soft landscaping and tree planting within the rear gardens of the host dwelling. Since the Planning Committee meeting on the 13th of January 2021, when the application was deferred for a virtual site visit, the applicant has submitted further plans amending the proposals as set out in detail in the committee report. The layout of the site and the rear elevation of the property are shown on page 3. The rear garden has been split into 2 level parts by the works, removing the previously approved gradient. A raised upper level that covers the majority of the garden, and a lower level strip along the eastern boundary. The upper level is predominantly turf, whilst the lower level is hard standing and gravel. Indicative tree planting is shown in the lower level of the garden here. However, the final location, size and species of tree planting would be subject to a planning condition. Page 4 shows the existing and proposed cross-section through the rear garden of the property and the relationship with the existing property to the rear at 35 Parklands Way. Grey slope represents the approved land level, whilst the yellow area represents the ground level as finished by the developer. This page shows a closer cross-section through the raised land level, retaining wall and steps looking north and south. The yellow and blue hatched area again demonstrates the raised land level as raised by the developer and then the applicant, respectively. The proposed extended southern retaining wall can be seen hatched in red on the southern boundary plan. The increased boundary fence height to the northern and southern boundaries can be seen in orange. The pergola structure is also shown on the southern boundary elevation. To the bottom of the plan is the proposed elevation for the rear boundary fencing, which is proposed to be increased in height to 2.7 meters. Photo 1 shows the view from the top of the retaining wall looking north towards the adjacent property at 5 Mayfair Gardens. Photo 2 is an image from a similar position looking northeast provided by the applicant in September last year. Photo 3 shows the view from the top of the retaining wall looking east towards the neighbouring property to the rear at 37 Parklands Way. This photo was taken in February 2020, and in the winter months, views over the existing fence and into these neighbouring gardens can be easily achieved. Photo 4 is an image from a similar position, looking in the same direction provided by the applicant in September 2020. Photo 5 shows the view from the top of the retaining wall looking southeast towards the adjacent neighbours at 35 Parklands Way to the rear and 7 Mayfair Gardens to the side. Again, this is a similar image provided by the applicant in September 2020. Photo 7 shows the hard standing to the lower level, retaining walls, steps and raised upper level taken in February 2020. Additional tree planting is proposed as part of the application within the gravel area. Photo 8 is from a similar position in November 2020. Photo 9 shows the view from the neighbouring property to the rear at 35 Parklands Way, looking west. The pergola, which sits on the upper level of the garden of 6 Mayfair Gardens, can be seen between the trees in the background. Panning to the right, photo 10 is looking directly towards the application site from 35 Parklands Way. And panning further to the right, photo 11 shows the view looking north towards the adjacent property at 37 Parklands Way. Photo 12 is a close-up view of the boundary between the application site and 35 Parklands Way with the pergola structure beyond. Photo 13 shows the view from the neighbouring property to the rear at 37 Parklands Way, looking towards the application site. Again, the pergola structure, which sits on top of the raised land level, can be seen in the centre of the image. And the proposed rear boundary fencing is proposed to be increased as part of this application. Panning further right, photo 14 shows the existing planting in the rear garden, 37 Parklands Way. And photos 15 and 16 show the rest of the shared boundary between 37 Parklands Way and the properties at Mayfair Gardens. Finally, photo 17 is a close-up view of the boundary between the application site and 37 Parklands Way. The proposal is set out in full within the committee report. The relevant planning history and full site context is also set out within the committee report. The application has been referred to the planning committee due to its retrospective nature and the number of objections received. The application has been advertised by 5 neighbour letters. Neighbour consultation was carried out in December 2019 and again in November 2020 and February 2021 following the receipt of amended plans. To date, 1 letter of support and 4 neighbour objections have been received. The concerns raised include the impact on the amenity of neighbours, the visual amenity and character of the area, landscaping, flood risk and surface water drainage, ecology, and the conflict with the approved plans for the wider development, amongst other concerns. All of the concerns raised are set out and considered in detail within the committee report. Following publication of the report, a further email was received by the Council's Chief Solicitor from an existing objector. This email has since been sent to members in full for their information. However, in summary, the concerns raised dispute the contents of the committee report, including concerns the proposals are contrary to the local plan and the officer recommendation is changed, raising drainage concerns again, highlighting the absence of a buffer zone and contending the size of neighbouring gardens is irrelevant. It is considered by officers, however, that this does not raise any new planning matters that have not already been satisfactorily addressed within the committee report. Concerns were initially raised by the council's ecologist with respect to the removal or omission of the landscape planting along the eastern boundary of the wider development and its impact on the local ecological network. Following receipt of amended plans to include tree planting, concerns were again raised by the council's ecologist and arboricultural officer with respect to the location and species of the proposed trees. However, as advised, it is considered that these concerns can be satisfactorily addressed through a planning condition. No further objections have been received from technical consultees subject to appropriate planning conditions. Technical consultee responses are set out in detail in the committee report. The main planning considerations are also set out in full within the report. With respect to the impact on neighbouring properties, it is considered that the works to raise the land level of the rear garden carried out to date currently result in an unacceptable loss of privacy for neighbours to the south and east. The applicant has been made aware of these concerns and in response has amended the submitted plans to propose an increase in the height of the boundary treatments to the north, east and south. It is considered that this would overcome the previous privacy concerns. Whilst it is acknowledged the proposed amended boundary treatments are high, it is not considered that these would have such a significant detrimental impact on the amenity of neighbours to warrant refusal of the application. There are therefore no further concerns with respect to the impact on the amended proposals on the amenity or privacy of neighbours, as set out in detail in the report. In terms of visual impact, it is not considered that the works carried out to date or the proposed alterations to boundary treatments would have such a significant visual impact to warrant refusal of the application, for the reasons set out in detail in the report. The works carried out to date have not provided any of the approved site landscaping for this plot, and it is considered the complete loss of the approved landscaping at this plot would have had a detrimental impact on the character of the area and local ecological networks. Again, the applicant was made aware of these concerns and in response has amended the application to include tree planting within the lower section of garden. Whilst the indicative location and species of the trees proposed is not considered appropriate, it is considered the final details of the tree planting can be agreed by condition in consultation with the council's ecologist and arboricultural officer, which the applicant and the relevant officers have agreed to. In respect of matters of flood risk and surface water drainage, while concerns have been raised by objectors, the council's flood risk officer has been consulted and has advised that they have no concerns provided the existing land drain on site has not been affected. The applicant has confirmed that the land drain has not been affected by the works. However, a condition is recommended to secure details of the location and design of the existing land drain and how it can be determined it has not been affected, or otherwise require the applicant to provide appropriate remediation works. With respect to any residual non-material matters, these are being considered and addressed within the report. For the reasons set out in the committee report, the application as amended is considered to be acceptable. Subject to the identified planning conditions as amended, the application is therefore recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ryan. Any questions for the officer? Councillor James.
Thank you, Chair. I have two questions and they are both in the email that's been received from John Whitehouse that we've got in our packets. The first one is that there is a little bit of a potential for some councillors to have a predetermination of the decision. I'd like to really know what that means and who is affected by that. And on the second page, it mentions an unconnected pipe which runs from number 6 to the rear of Mr. Whitehouse's property. And do we have any information about that and what its potential is for water flow?
Ryan.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. I'm afraid I'm not familiar with what the objector is referring to in the first point regarding predetermination. In terms of the reference to the unconnected pipe, as advised, the flood risk officer has been consulted, and we are aware that there's a land drain in this part of the site, which is why the flood risk officers asked for details of the location and design of that, which will be required by condition. The applicants confirmed that they haven't affected the existing drainage on site as part of the works. However, the condition will clarify that, and if it was identified there were any issues in terms of that, the condition requires remediation works to put that right.
Can I just come back, Chair?
Yep.
I'm a little bit disappointed, really, that an accusation has been made about some members being in a position of predetermination and that no one's bothered to check that out. I take my role on planning very seriously. So
Councillor James, sorry, the Chief Solicitor did check those accusations out and did respond to say that she found no predetermination of any.
Well, I
member
haven't
of the
received.
planning committee.
Have other members received confirmation of that from the solicitor? Because
I was hoping you were going to be sent that. Yes, that would have been useful if you had.
Well, I haven't seen anything like that.
Okay, well, I've received that, and I can confirm that Hayley Martin, the Chief Solicitor, was content and happy that.
So has that just come out as an email, or has that come out as printed papers?
It was an email response to the objector.
Because I said I haven't seen anything like that.
Can we arrange for that to be sent to members, please?
Have any other members received it, or has no one received it?
No, I was under the impression that it would have been sent out. So apologies if that hasn't been received by members. I can confirm that it has happened, though. The email from the Chief Solicitor has addressed the concerns.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Any further questions? No. We have the agent, I believe, on behalf of the applicant, Mr. Pearson. You've got 4 minutes with which to put your case across, and that's starting now.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, perfectly.
Chair, members of committee, my name is Graham Pearson, and I represent the applicant for this retrospective application for the alterations to ground levels, erection of retaining wall and alterations to boundary fence. I was originally contacted by the applicant when she had a visit from enforcement officer shortly after starting the works on the rear garden, which started early September 2019. The officer involved indicated that what she was doing would not be acceptable and to stop work. 2 representatives from Wynyard Homes joined the discussion with the officer. The officer proceeded to discuss everything with the representatives of Wynyard, and ignoring the applicant, who after all commissioned the works and owned the property, she considered to be rather rude. The applicant originally wanted to take down the existing fence and replace with a retaining wall and a new fence on top. However, the officer confirmed objections had already been received from residents to the rear of the property, and he stated that this would not be acceptable. The applicant took on board the comments and left the fence untouched. The garden has handed over to the applicant from Wynyard Homes was higher than the approved plans, which resulted in soil against the southern fence for 95% of the garden and allowed a closer view into the garden at the rear, which the applicant wanted to avoid. She then instructed a builder to remove over 130 cubic metres of soil from the bottom of the garden and build a new retaining wall over 4 metres from the rear boundary, forming a lower terrace between boundary and retaining wall. After the application, much discussion has taken place on site and via emails with the planning officer, whose position has remained steadfastly against what has been done. Amended proposals to add a 900mm trellis to top of existing rear boundary was submitted to officers who have in the committee report deemed not to be acceptable. The amendments of the proposal to include the trellis on top of the existing fence was not a solution to an admission of guilt, as highlighted in one of the objection letters, but was a positive response to their perceived concerns. It should also be noted that objections raised by number 7 Mayfair Gardens are also not valid, as the shared boundary has not been altered at all and exactly as purchased from Wynyard Homes. The garden was in place 6 months prior to the purchasing of 7 Mayfair. I would also like to refer you to an application considered by committee in August 2019 in Grasshome Road, where the applicant proposed to change levels in his garden to make his rear garden level. This would have resulted in ability to stand in his garden and look over the fence into neighbouring property. This was refused by committee and dismissed at appeal. What we seek consent for is the opposite to that proposal. By reducing the level at the bottom of the garden, makes more for a private garden for the applicant and, more importantly, properties at the rear. Interestingly, the first objection drawing attention to officers was made by a resident of Parklands Way, who has in recent months visited the applicant and confessed that in actual fact, the garden was perfectly acceptable and did not overlook or even perceive to overlook as he thought. Since it was last presented to committee and deferred for a site visit, the officer handling the application has suggested some changes to the proposal, which we have committed to in the amendments put before you today. These include increasing and extending the existing retaining wall, which falls under planning obligations on the southern boundary, assuming access rights can be granted by number 7 Mayfair to alter the wall. Erection of a new 2-metre high close bordered fence between 6 Mayfair and 7 Mayfair. The fence work can be done without affecting existing fence, which will remain in situ should 7 Mayfair object to the works and refuse access for works to be undertaken by the applicant or Wynyard Homes. The rear boundary fence onto the property in Parklands Way will be taken down and a new 2.7-metre close bordered fence erected in its place. 4 trees will be planted within the garden as outlined with the planning officer. In view of the planner's recommendation made and our commitment to undertake them, we ask you to approve the application. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for the agent? No indications. I believe we have an objector with us, Mr. Corrigan. Are you there, Mr. Corrigan?
Yes, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yep, you've got 4 minutes with which to put your case across, and that's starting now, please.
Okay. Chair, members of the committee, good morning. My name is Nick Corrigan. This is a statement on behalf of my parents, Mr. and Mrs. Corrigan, and the residents of 35 and 37 Parklands Way. When my parents purchased 7 Mayfair Gardens, they were looking forward to many happy years of retirement. Prior to commencing their landscaping in 2020, they checked the planning conditions for the development. The planning conditions required hedgerows, trees and turf to be planted to create, and I quote, an undeveloped nature area, which in turn would allow wildlife to flourish and the residents of Parkland Way to maintain sunlight, privacy and a pleasant outlook. The applicants have not adhered to this planning condition. The original garden topography of both my parents and the applicants were in fact very similar when handed to them by Wynyard Homes, with a generally level garden which sloped towards the eastern properties in Parklands Way. To maintain the garden levels, my parents have paid for any surplus soil created by their landscaping to be removed. The work has been completed in line with planning and with no impact on their neighbours' outlook, privacy or any loss of light. The question that we must now ask is why we're here today. The answer to this is quite simple. We are considering an application for an unauthorised development. An unauthorised development which has a negative effect on 3 of the 4 properties which share the boundary. It is our opinion that had some consideration been made by the applicant and excessive materials removed from their garden, it would not have impacted on my parents and the other neighbours, and this application would not be necessary. This is ultimately the root cause. The lack of consideration could now result in an unsightly, potentially unsafe, difficult to maintain and imposing 3-metre high solid structure, more attuned with a noise barrier fence on a highway or a hoarding rather than a residential property. The latest drawings indicate the proposed maximum height of the boundary would be around 2.7 metres for a short distance. This is not correct and is misleading. The proposed structure would in fact be 3 metres high for approximately 23 metres. Perhaps a drawing of the boundary from my parents' side would clear this discrepancy. We believe that this type and height of boundary structure is unprecedented in a residential setting and will cause my parents and neighbours anguish and untold stress if approval be granted at the heights and construction requested. My parents and their neighbours in Parklands Way have also experienced flooding issues as a result of this unauthorised development. These issues have not been addressed and remain outstanding. Their neighbours in Parklands Way have objected to the proposal as it does not consider the effects the unsightly 3-metre high solid fence will have on their view and the resulting total loss of sunlight from the west. My parents and their neighbours believe the planning system should protect them from such a development which will, if allowed to proceed, cause them untold stress, anxiety and sleepless nights. My parents are in their mid-70s, not in great health, and the stress of this development and ongoing pandemic crisis is having a negative effect upon them. Please consider this application on what impact it will have on the well-being of my parents and the adjoining neighbours in Parklands. In summary, the root cause of the problem needs to be addressed. This is an unauthorised development. It will result in the loss of direct sunlight for the resident of Parklands Way. This has not been considered in the report. The proposed structure will be generally 3 metres in height. The full ecology requirements are not met. It will set a precedence for the neighbours. And ironically, my parents have not raised any privacy issues with this existing boundary condition. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the objector? None. Can I just ask you to put your microphone on mute, please, Mr. Corrigan?
Chair, I did put my hand up. It was a little bit late, but it went up.
Okay, thanks, Councillor James. Go ahead.
I just want to get some clarification around the height of this actual fence, because obviously the objector is saying that it's tantamount to being almost 10 foot at 3 meters. So what is the truth of the height of this fence?
Ryan?
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, along the application does propose an increase in the height of 2.7 metres along the rear boundary. And as the fence wraps around the southern boundary, it does step up in height to the point where it's 2 metres high above the raised garden level in 6 Mayfair Gardens. And as set out in the report, it's paragraph 1.54. This would be up to approximately 2.9 metres from the neighbour's side in 7 Mayfair Gardens.
So it is going to be almost 10 foot at that point.
Yes, yeah, Councillor, approximately up to 2.9 metres.
Right, thank you.
Any further questions? We've got no ward councillors speaking on this application. General debate? No indications for general debate. Oh, Councillor James.
Yeah. Right. Thanks, Chair. I actually feel very much for the neighbours around this development, and it's disappointing. It's always disappointing, to be fair, when somebody takes it into their own hands to actually start building things before they actually have planning permission, because it really causes a bit of a distaste both for those neighbours that want to object fairly and for members trying to deal with it and run that special line that goes up the middle, where we don't really upset anybody. Because that's not going to be possible, I don't think, in this case. And I actually feel that the development is inappropriate, and I will be voting against it.
Councillor Carl Richardson.
Yes, I have to say I feel the same way. It's once again we have a situation where somebody starts developing things without planning permission. We have to make a stand on this, quite frankly, and therefore I would urge the committee to vote against this.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Richardson. No further indications. The application has been recommended by officers for approval, so it's for, against, or abstain approval of this application, and we'll go to Joe for the vote.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll start with Councillor Christopher Akers-Belcher.
For.
Councillor Brown.
For.
Councillor Buchan.
For.
Councillor Fleming.
Against.
Councillor Howson.
Against.
Councillor James.
Against.
Just to confirm, as Councillor Brewer was joined us midway through this item, he won't be able to vote on this one. We'll move on to Councillor Carl Richardson.
Against.
Councillor Tony Richardson.
Against.
Councillor Stokel.
For.
And Councillor Young.
Or.
I'll just do a quick tally of that.
I think that's a draw.
That's a draw. That is.
Okay. Oh, so I have the casting vote.
You have the casting vote, Chair.
Well, I've already voted for, so I'll have to go for, and that application has been approved.
Thank you very much.
Item 2 is 8 Gala Close, and I believe it is Dan who's going to bring this report.
Thank you, Chair. Just load the PowerPoint. Thank you, Chair. This item starts at page 23 of the PowerPoint and that of members' handout. The site relates to 8 Gala Close. The item was previously deferred at the Planning Committee meeting of the 13th of January 2021 to allow officers to investigate queries relating to the installation of artificial grass and a fire pit, and also for officers to view the development from the adjacent neighbour's property at number 9. Retrospective planning permission is sought for the erection of a summer house, outbuilding and shed, decking and associated works at 8 Gala Close. Since the previous planning committee, the applicant has reduced the height of both the summer house and shed structures to approximately 2.5 metres in height. The shed has also been detached from the summer house building, which is now exempt from requiring building regulations. Finally, the applicant has omitted the previously proposed 2.4 metre high boundary fence between the host property and the neighbour at 9 Gala Close from the scheme. The proposal is set out in full within the committee report. Looking to the PowerPoint and the handouts, the layout of the site in relation to neighbouring properties is shown on Plan 1 on page 24 of the PowerPoint. Plan 2 on the screen shows the existing site, i.e. before the works took place. Plan 3 shows the proposed site plan. Here we have the summer house and the detached shed. The decking areas in this location, as now indicated, there's areas of artificial grass that's been laid here and here. The fire pit that was previously for officers requested to investigate is sited on the decking and relates to a domestic style structure that will be discussed further. So Plan 4, this shows the reduced height structure of the summer house. The hatched line indicates the previous height, and it's since been lowered. So turning to the photos of the site, the photo 1 shows the view of the summer house structure prior to it being lowered in height. This is the reduced height of the structure, and as you can see, the difference between the eaves and the top of the roof to this window here shows where it's been reduced. It's also of note that the proposal was previously sat on stilts to allow ventilation in terms of contamination. Since it was reduced, a kickboard skirt has been put along here, and to address contamination concerns, that's since been removed. And I've got a further photo to show members if requested, but that has we've had evidence to confirm that's since been removed. This is a photo 3 towards the boundary with number 9. This is prior to the lowering of the structure, which remains at its original height on the left-hand side. This is the area of the artificial grass and the chimney, which was also noted. The chimney and the fire pit, which is this on the screen here, are both domestic related structures and are not considered to be development and therefore not require planning permission. That'll be discussed further as I move on. Again, a view from the neighbour's property. This is a view from the neighbour's property at number 9, looking towards the development, where following the lowering of the height of the structure and the detached from the shed from the summer house. Again, a view onto the decking, and this is the fire pit in question and the chimney as well as the artificial grass. Finally, that's a view towards the shed. Again, just moving through the photos, apologies. That's showing the shed now detached from the summer house, a view along the rear boundary for number 10 to the west, and again, a view to number 7, which shows the chimney along the boundary there. The application has been brought before the planning committee as the applicant is related to an officer within the council, as previously mentioned at the January committee, and also due to the number of objections received in line with the council scheme of delegation. The relevant planning history for the site is set out in the report. In terms of publicity, the application has been advertised in the usual way. To date, there have been 3 objections from members of the public. Those objections are summarised in paragraph 2.20 of the committee report. Since the previous committee, 1 updated objection has been received. In summary, the objection raises concerns surrounding visual amenity, privacy, the proposed use of the summer house, and provision of appropriate drainage. 1 query has also been received in respect of how the summer house has been erected to comply with ground gas conditions. Neither objections are considered to raise any additional matters that have not already been considered and addressed within the report. Responses from technical consultees are also detailed within the committee report. These include no objections from the council's engineering section in respect of flood risk contaminated land, or the council's building control section, who have confirmed that the structure is now exempt from building regulations, having detached the structure from the summer house and the shed. As a further update to members, following the submission of photos showing that as a result of the lowering in height of the summer house, the previously provided stilts that the structure sat on have been removed, whilst the decking has been fitted with a skirt of boards. The Council's flood risk officer commented that this would not satisfy the identified potential ground gas risk of such a structure. The applicant has since removed the skirting, and the Council's flood risk officer has confirmed no objections or further comments in respect of contaminated land. The Council's flood risk officer and the Council's public protection sections have also confirmed that there are no concerns in respect of the artificial grass chimney a fire pit. Furthermore, given that these elements are not considered to be development or those that would require planning permission, any resultant future issues could be covered by separate legislation as discussed within the report. Turning to the main planning considerations that are identified in the report, whilst it's acknowledged that the householder permitted development rights are removed owing to the ground gas risk of the Warrior Drive estate, given that the Council's engineering section is satisfied with the method of construction, it's considered that the height of the structure as amended is within the limits of what would usually be considered acceptable by virtue of householder permitted development rights, and therefore it's not considered to result in such a significant adverse impact on the visual amenity or neighbouring amenity and privacy as to warrant refusal of the application in this instance. As requested by members, the case officer visit the neighbouring property to consider the proposal, and officers remain of the view that the development is acceptable following the reduced height of the summer house, and that the previously proposed 2.4 metre high fence is not necessary for the reasons set out in the report. The proposal is also considered to be acceptable in respect of other matters. For the reasons set out in the report, it's considered that the proposal is acceptable, and it's recommended that the application be approved subject to the appropriate planning conditions as outlined in the report. Chair, just to note that both the applicant and the objector spoke at the meeting when the application was considered in January, and therefore it is understood that the matter would now move to general debate. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Dan. We'll enter into general debate. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I was a bit late there. Dan, just a bit of clarification. I might have got a bit confused with what you were saying there, but are we saying this development now doesn't need planning permission?
Thank you, Councillor. One of the, normally you could erect a 2.5 metre high structure without needing planning permission. On the original estate, the permission for the estate for Warrior Drive, such permitted development rights were removed because of the ground gas conditions, so to ensure new extensions or detached structures were fitted with the appropriate mechanisms to address this. So the fact that it does need permission because of that condition, but contamination matters have been satisfactorily addressed through the fact that the structure will be ventilated, and the flood risk officer is satisfied with that. So what this does represent is a hypothetical fallback situation. So had the condition around contamination not existed, they could have erected these structures without requiring planning permission. Therefore, to that effect, we consider that that is a material consideration then in the assessment of this application. So forgetting the contamination matters for one side, they could have erected that structure without planning permission ordinarily, but it's only because of the contamination condition that it does need the permission. If that makes sense.
Councillor Brown.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, thank you. That clears it up completely. Basically, what we're saying is anywhere else in the town, this would have been permissible, but because of a problem which they have addressed and done everything to do within that, it needs a bit of planning permission. Yeah, got that. Thank you.
Okay. There's no further indications. The application has been recommended by officers for approval, so it's for, against, abstain, approval, and we'll go to the vote, please, Joe.
Thank you very much, Chair. We'll start with Councillor Christopher Akers-Belcher.
For.
Councillor Brown.
For.
Councillor Buchan.
For.
Councillor Fleming.
For.
Councillor Howson.
For.
Councillor James.
For.
Councillor Brewer.
For.
Councillor Carl Richardson.
For.
Councillor Tony Richardson.
For.
Councillor Stokel.
For.
And Councillor Young.
For. I think that's unanimous.
That's unanimous, Chair.
Yeah, the application has been approved. Number 3 is land at Quarry Farm, and I believe it's Ryan bringing this report.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll just start sharing the presentation again. This item starts on page 39 of the PowerPoint and your handout. The site relates to land at Quarry Farm and the development known as Quarry Farm Phase 2. The site is accessed via Reedston Road and the development is currently under construction. Planning Permission is sought for a Section 73 amendment to the previous Planning Permission to allow house type substitutions and amendments to the site layout and landscaping. The applicant, Barrett Homes Northeast, is seeking to replace a proportion of the Barrett Homes house types with David Wilson Homes house types, with the site in effect to be divided between the two brands. The proposals do not affect the overall number of dwellings on site, however, which will remain at 220. The layout of the site as approved is shown on the left of this slide, whilst the proposed amended layout is shown on the right. As can be seen, the overall layout of the site remains largely as approved. However, in order to accommodate the larger David Wilson house types, the proposals require an extension to the built area of the site to the south, consisting of 2 rows of dwellings. Page 41 shows more clearly the proposed split between the Barrett Homes house types in the north of the site and the David Wilson house types to the south. Pages 42 to 48 of the presentation show a selection of the elevation and floor plan drawings of the proposed David Wilson house types. Page 49 shows the landscape strategy plan for the site as amended. And as shown in slides 50 to 52, the applicant has also provided updated versions of the proposed site boundary treatment plan, the parking plans, and the finishing materials layout to reflect the proposed changes. Photo 1 shows the view looking northwest along Reedston Road towards the application site. Photo 2 shows the view looking across the site from the north, taken from Warsett Lane. Photo 3 shows the southern part of the site as viewed from the adjacent residential development at Quarry Farm Phase 1. The proposal is set out in full within the committee report. The relevant planning history and full site context is also set out within the report. The application has been referred to the Planning Committee due to the number of objections received. The application has been advertised by 110 neighbour letters, 6 site notices and a press notice. To date, 2 objections have been received from neighbours. The concerns raised include the impact on traffic and highway safety, as well as flood risk and surface water drainage. The 3rd objection was received from Hart Parish Council. No concerns or objections have been received from technical consultees. Technical consultee responses are set out in detail in the committee report. The main planning considerations are set out in full within the report. The principle of the development remains acceptable in the context of national and local planning policy as per the previous approvals for this site. In terms of the amenity and privacy of neighbouring properties and future occupiers, adequate separation distances in line with policy requirements continue to be maintained between the proposed dwellings and existing neighbouring properties, as well as within the site between the proposed dwellings. The application is therefore considered to be acceptable in this respect. In terms of visual impacts and landscaping, the proposed house types are considered to be of an appropriate design, and whilst the proposals do result in the loss of an element of the previously approved landscaping, the site would still be served by generous amounts of open space in line with policy requirements, and it is therefore considered that this would not compromise the character of the development or the surrounding area. The application is therefore considered to be acceptable in this respect. Similarly, in terms of the impact on ecology, the proposals continue to deliver the required amount of sustainable alternative natural green space in line with policy requirements, and the Council's ecologist has confirmed they have no objections. The application is therefore considered to be acceptable in this respect. In terms of all other relevant material planning considerations, no concerns have been received from technical consultees, and the application is therefore considered to be acceptable with respect to these matters, as set out in detail in the report. In terms of any residual and non-material matters, these have been considered and addressed within the report. For the reasons set out in the committee report, the application is therefore considered to be acceptable. Notwithstanding this, following publication of the report, advice from the Council's lawyer indicates that the applicant may also need to update their existing Section 106 legal agreement to reflect the proposed amendments. And therefore, as an update to the report and the recommendation, The recommendation is also subject to a deed of variation to update the existing legal agreement where necessary. Subject to the identified planning conditions and the aforementioned variation to the legal agreement where necessary, the application is therefore recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ryan. Any questions for the officer? No indications. We have the agent for the applicant. I believe it's Amy Ward. Is that correct?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, the applicant.
You've got 4 minutes.
Thank you, Chair.
Put your case across.
Good morning. My name is Amy Ward, and I am the planning manager at Barratt David Wilson Homes North East. Our site at Elwick is predicated on good design and the creation of a high-quality development. It is a landscape scheme where the houses are complemented by landscaping, suds ponds, play parks and walkways through the sites. Keen to complement our scheme, both in terms of design and product mix, this proposal seeks consent for a plot substitution on 69 plots from our Barratt brand to our David Wilson brand. David Wilson homes are slightly larger than our Barratt houses, with their main difference being the internal specification of the houses. The majority of the David Wilson houses proposed are 4-bedroom houses, although the introduction of David Wilson does add a small element of 5-bedroom houses onto the site. The houses are relatively large, and their external appearance and internal layouts will appeal to a wide market, expanding the housing offer on site. All of the houses are 2-storey in height to reflect those already approved and to reflect the scale of the surrounding built form. These house types will aid the formation of strong street scenes amongst a variety of streets in terms of width, setback distances, surfaces and materials to create visual interest across the site. The house type booklet gives an insight into the elevational treatments, exterior of the houses and internal layout of those houses proposed. This will add architectural diversity to the site and enhance the overall design and housing offer. A further benefit of adding David Wilson houses onto the site is the opportunity for us as a company to dual brand the site. Effectively, we run the development as 2 separate sites with 2 compounds, 2 separate builds and 2 show houses. This has a massive benefit in terms of the build out of the site. It enables the quicker delivery of houses, both benefit to us and to Hartlepool Council meeting the housing target, but also surrounding residents, as it effectively means we will be finished building on the site a lot sooner than with just the one product. This scheme has been developed to deliver a comprehensive, well thought out, landscape-led development. The open spaces include footpaths, cycleways and play areas, providing an attractive and usable open space for residents of the proposed development and the surrounding village of Elwick. The introduction of our David Wilson houses will further complement this high-quality design, adding architectural diversity to the site, enhancing the overall design and expanding the housing offer on site. We hope that the committee will see the benefit of the introduction of the David Wilson houses and approve the application in line with the officer's recommendation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the applicant? No indications. We've got no objector today. Ward councillors don't want to speak on the application. We'll go into general debate. No indications for general debate. The application has been recommended for approval, so it's for, against or abstain approval, and we'll go to the vote, please, Jo.
Thank you very much, Chair. Councillor Christopher Akers-Belcher.
For.
Councillor Brown.
For.
Councillor Buchan.
For.
Councillor Fleming.
For.
Councillor Howson.
For.
Councillor James.
For.
Councillor Brewer.
For.
Councillor Carl Richardson.
For.
Councillor Tony Richardson.
For.
Councillor Stokel.
For.
And Councillor Young.
For. The application is approved. Number 4 is Mayfield House, and I believe it's Ryan taking this report.
Thank you, Chair. This item starts on page 56 of the PowerPoint and your handout. The site relates to Mayfield House, Dalton Piercy Road. Page 57 of the PowerPoint shows the wider context of the site, which is located in the open countryside west of the main urban area of Hartlepool. West Park is visible to the right of the plan. Outline planning permission, with all matters reserved, is sought for a residential development comprising the erection of 5 detached dwellings with associated detached garages and access including demolition of the existing dwelling, detached garage and stable block. Page 58 shows the existing layout of the site, with the existing dwelling located centrally within the site and access taken from Dalton Piercy Road to the west. Page 59 shows the elevations of the existing dwelling house and associated outbuildings on site, which are proposed to be demolished as part of the application. Whilst the application isn't outline only and therefore the layout is not considered in detail through this application, the applicant has provided an illustrative proposed site layout plan as shown on page 60. Similarly, the appearance and scale of the proposed development is a reserved matter and therefore is not being considered in detail through this application. However, the applicant has provided illustrative proposed elevation and floor plan drawings for one of the plots as shown on page 61. Photo 1 shows the view from the site access looking east towards the existing garage and dwelling. Panning to the right, the existing dwelling is now in full view in photo 2. Further to the right, and photo 3 shows the existing trees at the front of the site, sitting between the two existing site accesses. Photo 4 is looking south towards the second site access. Dalton Piercy Road can be seen on the right of the image. Photo 5 shows the view from the second site access looking towards the existing dwelling house and garage. Panning to the left, photo 6 shows the view looking back along Dalton Piercy Road to the north. The application site is on the right of the image. This photo shows the rear of the existing dwelling house taken from the rear garden. The existing detached garage can be seen in the background. Photo 8 is also from the rear of the existing dwelling house, taken from the other side. This photo is looking southwest across the rear garden area. Photo 9 shows the existing detached garage to the side of the existing dwelling house. This photo shows views looking northeast from the rear of the existing dwelling house. An existing watercourse runs through the vegetation shown in the image. The next photo shows the view further to the right, looking across the open countryside to the east. Photo 12 is looking further to the southeast across the site, with the adjacent holiday accommodation at Abbey Hill Cottages visible in the background. Looking southwest across the rear garden space, again photo 13 shows the existing holiday accommodation adjacent to the site in the background. Photo 14 shows the existing east-facing elevation of the stable and garage building on site, as viewed from the rear garden. Excuse me. Photo 15 shows the existing stable and garage building viewed from the front of the dwelling house. The proposal is set out in full within the committee report. The relevant planning history and full site context is also set out within the report. The application has been referred to the planning committee at the request of ward councillor. The application has been advertised by 19 neighbour letters, a site notice and a press notice. To date, one objection has been received from a neighbour with concerns regarding the impact of the proposals on highway and pedestrian safety. Concerns and objections have also been received from the Council's Planning Policy section, the Council's Traffic and Transport section, the Council's Landscape Architect, the Council's Ecologist, Elwick Parish Council, Dalton Piercy Parish Council, Greetham Parish Council, and the Hartlepool Rural Neighbourhood Plan Group. No further objections have been received from technical consultees subject to appropriate planning conditions or obligations. Technical consultee responses are set out in detail in the committee report. Turning to the main planning considerations, which are set out in full in the report, in terms of the principle of the development, the proposal consists of the erection of 5 isolated dwellings within the open countryside beyond the development limits. The location of the site is therefore considered to be unsustainable, isolated from other communities, services and amenities, with pure sustainable transport links to neighbouring villages and the main urban area of Hartlepool. It is considered the development would do little to preserve the vitality and viability of the rural area due to its isolation, and would not provide an appropriate housing mix as required by local planning policy. There is no identified need for the proposed housing, with the council able to demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply, and the application fails to provide satisfactory justification for such a departure from the development plan or meet any of the tests for new rural dwellings set out in the local plan and rural neighbourhood plan. The development will also encroach into the protected green gaps within the rural neighbourhood plan. The principle of the development in this instance is therefore not considered to be acceptable. Whilst the applicant has indicated their willingness to provide a financial contribution towards improvements to walking links within the area, they have not agreed to provide a contribution towards the highway infrastructure improvements at the Elwick bypass and the A19 grade separated junction as required by the council's highways and planning policy teams. The development is therefore also considered unacceptable in this respect. In terms of the visual impact of the proposals, whilst the replacement of the existing dwelling with a single new dwelling of a similar scale would be acceptable in principle, it is considered that the erection of 5 large dwellings in this rural location would fail to preserve or enhance the open character and distinctiveness of the countryside, and would have an unacceptable detrimental impact on the visual amenity of the site and the character and appearance of the surrounding rural area. With respect to ecological matters, whilst the applicant has provided a preliminary ecological appraisal, further ecological surveys recommended by the applicant's own appraisal and required by the council's ecologist to inform the decision have not been forthcoming. It is therefore considered the application fails to provide sufficient information to demonstrate that the development would not have an unacceptable impact on ecology, and is therefore also considered unacceptable in this respect. In terms of archaeology, no supporting archaeological information has been submitted with the application, and Tees Archaeology initially requested an archaeological evaluation, including trial trenching, be carried out prior to determination of the application. The applicant has not provided this information, however has indicated they would be willing to accept a planning condition to secure it should permission be granted. Tees Archaeology has agreed to this on balance, however has highlighted the inherent risks and uncertainty in this approach. In terms of all other relevant material planning considerations, no further objections have been received from technical consultees subject to appropriate planning conditions, and the application is otherwise considered to be acceptable with respect to all of the matters, as set out in detail in the report. With respect to any residual non-material matters, these have also been considered and addressed within the report. For the reasons set out in the committee reports, the application is therefore considered to be unacceptable. The application is recommended for refusal accordingly. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Ryan. Any questions for the officer? No indications. We have the applicant, Mr. John Whitfield. You have, oh, sorry, Councillor Christopher Akers-Belcher.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, it was just a couple of things. I remember sitting on planning quite some time ago, and there was some developments like individual 2 properties that were agreed by planning, who were similar dwellings and considered to be isolated. Would the officer know where they are in location to these proposed ones? Also, I'm not really sure why it states that it's an unsustainable as other individual properties, like, you know, in the vicinity.
Ryan?
I am aware there were 2 dwellings to the west of the site approved by the planning committee. I understand the recommendation from officers was to refuse that application, if that's what the council is referring to.
Okay, thank you.
Properties have since been built and they are within the vicinity of development.
Yes, yes, I believe so.
I just don't understand why, when the pictures were shown, that we weren't shown, like, you know, in comparison, that there is other similar properties that are built within the vicinity.
Okay. Councillor Stokel, is it a question for the officer, or is it more a general debate point? Because this is questions for the officer at this moment in time.
Oh, sorry, I'll leave it for general debate.
Okay, fair enough. Jim Ferguson.
I don't think the site that no, according to me, I'm not, but I don't think the think the site that's been referred to is that close to this development, Ryan? It's kind of more towards Dalton Piercy, isn't it? I think. Is it at Hart on the Hill?
Yes, I believe so, Jim.
I think it's that little triangular site there. Yeah, but the adjacent, so you wouldn't necessarily see it in the context of this site.
Okay.
Come back because there was the other point in the question
Yeah.
that I don't understand. With there being 5 developments, and like, you know, whilst I understand what Jim's saying, not being in the vicinity, we had 2 proposed developments, like, you know, that have been built. I don't understand properties will be deemed as unsustainable development.
Ryan?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. The reference to the development being unsustainable is due to the limited access to local services and amenities. Now, the closest village is Dalton Piercy, but even Dalton Piercy has a limited lack of local services and amenities. And the next closest locations will be in Elwick or in the main urban area of the town, which are considered quite a significant distance. And as advised, this is beyond the development limits.
Thank you.
Okay. We have the applicant with us, Mr. John Whitfield. Are you there?
Good morning.
Yep, go ahead. You've got 4 minutes.
Good morning, members and chair. My name is John Whitfield. The proposed development makes the most effective use of land to deliver quality housing, which in turn supports the economy of the rural area, detailed in the planning statement. Whilst the report states the council does have a 5-year land supply, there has been limited progress on delivering such sites, such as the Southwest Extension. The impact that COVID is going to have upon the housing delivery is yet unknown. The site is deliverable, and therefore it will make a valuable contribution to housing stock. The authority will benefit from the new homes bonus and council tax receipt, although the latter is not a planning consideration. Mr. Cowley states in his report that the current site comprises of a 1970s detached dwelling house with large detached garages. The design is considered somewhat nondescript and not particularly sympathetic to the character of the rural area. Although this is outlined, the proposals are to deliver quality architectural designed homes, possibly the greenest within the borough. They are to boast solar, air source heating, grey water systems for rainwater recycling, the latest in biodegradable foul storage, and electric car charging points. Considering the comments raised by the parish council, I disagree on the impact and the reduction of the green gap. Dalton Village is 0.8 miles from the site, and significantly, the Southwest Extension has 1,200 plus houses, which borders the boundaries of Mayfield House. Traffic and transport have no objections, no concerns with the proposed development prior to what Mr. Cowley is saying. I also draw attention to the number of recent approvals, many of these committee, including Hart on the Hill. For the record, Hart on the Hill, the houses you're talking about, is 300 yards away. You've got Dalton Heights, Whitegates Farm, Elwick House, and Ashfield Caravan Park. In terms of ecology and nature conservation, I welcome the involvement and input from the ecology officer to enhance the development and the offering. The ecology impact assessment confirms the trees and will replace. I've also agreed that the Section 106 contribution for green infrastructure improvements to the grass verge along the Dalton Highway. Point 411 of your report, Mr. Cowley, states the Highways England offer no objection, yet go on to ask for a further contribution of £60,000 towards the A19 bypass. 4.68, the reality is Highways England responded to confirm that due to the scale of the development being small in terms of traffic generation, only 5 houses, and its location of over a mile from the nearest point of the strategic road network, the A19, its impact on us is limited. Mr. Cowley's request for £60,000 seems therefore to contradict the Highways England. Furthermore, I cannot find any evidence of any of the recently approved payment being made by small developments nearby. So to conclude, the application is to demolish a nondescript and non-particularly sympathetic 1970s dwelling to be replaced with 5 architecturally designed homes featuring the latest in green technology. provide 4 times new homes bonus and council tax receipts, a £2,500 Section 106 contribution for grass verge improvements, agreement conditions to work with the ecology and condition further surveys. 4.105, Mr. Cowley states, this application is considered to be acceptable with respect to the impact on landscape, features, tree protection, subject to be identified conditions and in accordance with the relevant policies of the development plan and the relevant paragraphs within the National Plan and Policy Framework. I therefore ask members to consider approval of this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Whitfield? There's no objections to the application. No ward councillors to speak on the application. General debate. Councillor Stokel.
I just want to know, how close does the southwest extension go to the boundary of this proposed development?
Is it okay for me to talk?
No, I'm sorry, Mr. Whitfield. No, according to Mr. Whitfield, it abuts the land of Mayfield House. Do officers want to comment?
It's not. Yeah. Mr. Whitfield's mistaken. It's not the southwest extension. It's High Tunstall development.
Okay. So it is.
I think it's about. Yeah, it's about 0.6 of a. It's about It's about 6 of a mile, I think it says in the report. But the important point to make is that High Tunstall development is within the development boundary. So the development boundaries for the town are drawn at that point, whereas this site isn't within the development boundaries. Thank you.
Councillor Akers-Belcher.
Thank you, Chair. That points I wanted to raise, because the 1,200 homes, the Tunstall development.
We've lost you.
Like, you know.
No, I think you broke up rather than went on mute. Sorry, Christopher.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
It was just the 1,200 houses that were agreed for the Tunstall development. I understood that there were within the vicinity, but there was also going to be amenities for residents within that, like, you know, a development. But I think that's been answered, and I know it's within. It's going, when it's built, it's going to be within the vicinity. But I wanted clarification, because stood the Heart on the Hill 2 developments, like, you know, were within the vicinity, and I've been told that they're not, and they're too far away. But Mr. Whitfield, he has clearly said they're 300 yards away. So I just want to know whether they are within the vicinity or not.
It's a matter of opinion, isn't it? I've pointed out on the plan where there were. Your question related to why weren't shown in the photograph, I thought. I said is that they're not in the immediate vicinity, which is why they wouldn't have been in photographs. But I did point out on the plan, on the site plan, where the 2 on Heart on the Hill were. Whether it's in the immediate vicinity or not is a matter of opinion, I guess, isn't it?
Just to be clear, then, are they?
Oh, you're breaking up, Councillor Akers-Belcher.
I just wanted to ask: are they 300 yards away? Are they not?
Ryan.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, I believe the Heart on the Hill site is approximately 200 to 250 metres to the southwest of this site, where those 2 dwellings are.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Any further general debate? No. The officer's recommendation is for refusal. So it's for, against, abstain, refusal. And we will go to the vote, please, Jo.
Thank you very much, Chair. Councillor Christopher Akers-Belcher. Sorry, I didn't catch that.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Brown?
For.
Councillor Buchan?
For.
Councillor Fleming?
For.
Councillor Howson.
For.
Councillor James.
Again.
Councillor Brewer.
Against.
Councillor Carl Richardson.
Against.
Councillor Tony Richardson.
Against.
Councillor Stokel.
Against.
And Councillor Young.
Against.
That was 7-4 against.
So that means that the application needs to go to another vote. Is there a member who wants to come forward and specify a reason, or is Jim able to give a summary? Do you want a member to come forward? Okay, that's fine.
I'm struggling really to give a summary because no reasons were.
Well, I think that's the problem, Chair, is that I haven't heard a reason for refusal articulated by the members.
Right, well, Chair, can I articulate something then?
Yes, you can, Councillor James.
Right, the reason that I voted against and therefore to approve the application is that whilst in the report it says that these properties will be isolated, over the next year or so, or a couple of years of development that was already approved, then they will not be isolated and therefore are sustainable.
Okay. Jim's just writing that down. Okay, we shall go to the second vote then. This is now for approval. So it's 4 against. Oh, sorry, Councillor Akers-Belcher, I apologise. I did see your hand as well, so apologies.
Thank you, Chair. It's just that when I was speaking, I asked some questions, and it had in the recommendation that it was considered that it was unsustainable development. Like, you know, and it picks up Councillor James's point in the form of isolated new dwellings. And I think we've established that there wouldn't be isolated new dwellings in the longer term because there's going to be 1,200 houses built at one side, and we've already agreed the building of houses within 300 yards. So I think that, and they will have access to amenities because when in the fullness of time, when the Tunstall development is built, they will have amenities all around them that they can access. So I just think that needs to be put into the mix.
Yeah. I think the other point is that conditions need to be referred to the Chief Planning Officer in consultation with the Chair.
Yeah. Sorry, can we have conditions and also the green infrastructure contribution which has been agreed? I'm taking it that as it formed a reason for refusal that members are happy that they don't contribute to the bypass.
Absolutely.
So the conditions and the completion of the legal agreement securing the green infrastructure contribution will be delegated to myself.
Okay, Councillor Akers-Belcher.
Chair, it was just adds to the contributions, bearing in mind the money that the council is going to receive from the combined authority towards the pass and the contributions already received and articulated with the plan application for the Tunstall development. I think it is unfair to seek an objection towards Elwick bypass from the developer. I don't think that should be considered.
Okay. Yeah, Jim. Yeah, that's
what I was confirming. You didn't want that contribution, Councillor.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll go ahead with the vote for, against, or abstain approval of the application.
Thank you very much, Chair. Councillor Christopher Akers-Belcher.
For.
Councillor Brown.
Against.
Councillor Buchan.
Against.
Councillor Fleming.
Against.
Councillor Howson.
For.
Councillor James.
For.
Councillor Brewer.
For.
Councillor Carl Richardson.
For.
Councillor Tony Richardson.
For.
Councillor Stokel.
For.
And Councillor Young.
For. That application is approved. Item 5 is 11 Meadowgate. and I believe it's Dan bringing this report.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just get my presentation up.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Fleming, did you want to say something? Apologies, I didn't see your hand. Councillor Fleming?
Sorry. Yeah, sorry, it's just, it's not to do with this, it's to do with the sound on the actual meeting. It's been cutting out on different councillors all the time.
Yeah, I think it's fair. It's a bit unstable today. You're right, Councillor
Yeah.
Fleming.
That's all it is.
We'll try and persevere. I'm trying to kind of get people to repeat things as much as I can. I'll try and continue to do that. Thank you, Dan.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Chair. The item is page 77 of your handout, members, and that on the slideshow. The site relates to 11 Meadowgate Drive. The location of the property is shown on page 77 and the plan on page 78. Both the relevant planning history and the site context of the application site are set out within the committee report. Of particular note in terms of the history is that railings were erected along part of the side boundary of the property approximately 10 years ago. On the screen before members, this is the application site in red, and the railings in question are along this area in blue. For the most part, the main length, most of the railings were understood to have been erected more than 10 years ago and would therefore be exempt from any enforcement action. This application primarily relates to the last 2 metres of railings that have been erected more recently. On the screen before members is a design or an image of the railings that have been erected. Moving to the photographs, in terms of page 80, this is a view into the cul-de-sac. As you can see on the left-hand side at number 1, these railings were previously granted planning permission as set out in the committee report. The railings are approximate. Sorry, just move on to the next one. So these are the railings in question. As I say, it's primarily the last 2 metres in length of railings that have been erected more recently. They relate to 0.9 metre high railings, and they're to match existing railings that are at the property and in the wider estate. Finally, a further view to the railings. Sorry, there's another photo. And lastly, here the railings in question here. The application was advertised in the usual manner, and 4 objections have been received from neighbouring properties, and these are detailed within the committee report. Responses from technical consultees are also detailed within the report, and in summary, there are no objections raised. The main planning considerations are identified in the report. When viewed as a whole, both the old railings and the more recent additions are considered to be of an appropriate design and are considered to be in keeping with other enclosures in the area. The railings are of an open design that also allow views through them, and they are also considered to be of a modest scale given their height. The design is therefore not considered to be imposing. The additional railings which this application relates to are not considered to notably alter the character of the street scene or create an overbearing appearance that would significantly be detrimental to the amenity of neighbouring properties. One of the main concerns raised by objectors is the potential for highway safety and parking implications. It is acknowledged that the development may limit space to manoeuvre while other vehicles are parked on the shared drive. However, ultimately the proposal denotes the boundary of private land rather than preventing access to the adopted highway. The Council's Traffic and Transport section have been consulted on the application and raised no objections in relation to highway safety or car parking. It is therefore considered that the development is in accordance with the relevant local and national planning policy, and therefore the application is recommended for approval subject to the conditions identified within the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Dan. Any questions for Dan? No. Oh, Councillor James. Councillor James.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask for some confirmation, really. Would it be down to residents who feel that there is a pinch point being created, and to an extent I do agree with that from the pictures, that it's going to be more difficult for some of the properties to actually access and egress from their properties via a vehicle, because the road is quite narrow now that the railing has been extended. Would that be a civil matter for residents to deal with in a civil court rather than through planning?
Yes, I could interpose there, Chairman. My understanding is that they're using the front part of the front garden as a manoeuvring area, i.e. they appear to be driving over private land in order to get their vehicles in and out, which is trespass, quite frankly. So if the railings are demarking the private property boundary, then as far as the civil law is concerned, the applicants are perfectly within their rights. Looking at the pictures, I gain the impression that the pinch point is caused by haphazard parking rather than anything else. But I'll say that's purely impressionistic based on the photographs.
Thanks, Tom. Councillor James.
Well, the question I'm really asking is because I don't believe that this is a planning issue. I don't really think that this application should be here because there is nothing for planning to add or take away from it.
Thank you very much. We have the applicant with us, Mr. Stuart Bennett. Are you there, sir?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you've got 4 minutes to put your case across.
Thank you. So, first of all, Mr. Chair, and thank the committee for the opportunity today to speak in relation to gaining approval for the erection of the railings. My name is Stuart Bennett. Whilst there has developed over time a misunderstanding between neighbours, this application is based purely on the protection of personnel and property. We recognise that ignorance is no excuse, but we would like to share with the committee the background of subsequent erection and planning application. We bought this house from plan and are the original owners moved into the property when the estate was still in construction. We were approached by the site manager at the time, who shared with us that the design of access onto house numbers 7 and 9 is not adequate. There was a demarcation between the properties originally via a strip of grass between our fence line and house numbers 7 and 9, approximately 1.5 metres in width, the full length up to the curbside. We agreed between all three parties that access to their homes would mean driving over the grass, then it would be in the best interest to tarmac the whole land, thus allowing access to their properties. With the best intentions and upkeeping with the estate, the previous owners of house numbers 7 and 9, prior to the incumbents, supported us in the decision to erect the original fence line circa 10 years ago. Throughout that time, we've had no objections from any of the households in the area. That includes those that have objected to this application. I suspect that over time, as families grow up and more cars per family use the estate, then the original design has been outgrown by the volume of traffic and as such has now become more restrictive. At that time, we did not apply for planning permission as we had no knowledge to an addendum to the site as stated an open plan appearance was to be maintained. In fact, the only time we were aware was when the planning officer came to visit the property for this application. The decision to extend the railings along the fence line, and it is 2 metres as per mentioned in the report, was taken due to several incidents of near misses by both homeowners' cars and delivery drivers accessing house numbers 7 and 9. Not only to our cars, but more seriously to personnel when either getting out of our car or when our 7-year-old granddaughter is playing on our drive. This prompted me to erect the extension, of which is in good faith and with no knowledge of requiring planning permission as per circa 10 years ago. In mitigation against the objections raised to this application, I would like to point out the following. We fully accept that no prior notice or permission was sought and can only state facts that we were unaware of the addendum to the site planning of being open plan. Upon that knowledge, we made the application to seek permission. The adequacy of parking, safe loading, unloading and safe turning of service, delivery and private vehicles to all properties in the cul-de-sac, inclusive of emergency service vehicles, has not been limited in any way, as the railings are purely a demarcation of a property line of our property 11 Middlegate Drive. This objection infers that access to our property is necessitated in order to carry out the above. The objection of being unsightly, while the design may not be to everyone's taste, is unfounded, as those objecting have made alterations to their property so that cars are now parked outside of their windows and as such cannot see the railings. In addition to this, we submitted photographs from the view of the properties looking out the railings and the height is below the window view. As stated by the submission of Mr Peter Nixon of Hartlepool Borough Council Traffic and Transport Department, there are no highway or traffic concerns as a result of the erection of the railings. This proving the objection of access to emergency vehicles being restricted to be unfounded. The objections raised that the erection of the railings now require large vans or wagons to mount house number 3 infers that our property is required to be accessed. In summary, while we fully accept planning permission was not sought due to ignorance, We feel that objections raised has no factual detriment to the occupiers of the cul-de-sac. Finally, my primary focus is to keep my family safe, and the railings act as a safety barrier against traffic entering cul-de-sac. We respectfully request the submission has been approved, and thanks for the committee for allowing us the opportunity to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Bennett? None. We have an objector, Mr. Graham Roberts. Is he on the call? Okay. Mr. Roberts said that if he wasn't on the call, would I be able to read something out? So if members will allow me to, I will read out a statement from Mr. Roberts as the objector. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the committee for accepting this written transcript in the event of my not being able to join the virtual platform to represent the above named people. Unfortunately, my absence is due to my responsibility to my students and my employer as I return to my teaching duties in line with the government's pathway out of lockdown. The concerns regarding the development and potential restrictions of emergency service access have been written and recorded previously on the planning portal in response to the retrospective application and personally voiced to me by the owners of numbers 9, 7, 5 and 3 Meadowgate Drive to be presented to the committee today. Neighbours are in agreement that the fence at over 10 metres is excessive and unduly large, and as a permanent, immovable wrought iron fixture is not in keeping with the original open plan concept of Eden Park development. Photographs submitted by the applicant, taken from directly outside the lounge window of number 7, clearly show the close proximity and unnecessary extent of the boundary railings as they traverse the front aspect of a number of neighbouring properties, the only fixed metal permanent boundary on a housing development of approximately 90 homes to do this. One specific photograph details, in the event of all private and public parking areas being occupied, how the permanently fixed development seriously narrows the opening available for emergency service vehicles to access and safely and quickly manoeuvre should their services be required, thus compromising public safety and costing potentially life-saving seconds in the event of an emergency. The majority feeling of those affected both mentally and physically by the permanent fixture of the metal railing fence is that the boundary outline may be more in keeping with the open plan concept of the estate if, as a compromise, a less permanent, greener alternative such as a potted or tub plants or shrubs were deployed, resting wholly within the boundary of number 11 Meadowgate Drive, which would be more manageable in allowing safe and rapid response of emergency service vehicles in the event of an incident requiring medical or rescue services. And that ends. Any questions? Well, you can't ask me any questions because I don't know what the answer would be. So there we go. No comments from ward councillors. We'll go into general debate.
Chair, can I ask a question rather than go into debate?
You can.
Have we received any complaints from any of the emergency services who are, at the end of the day, statutory consultees in the main? Have they made any objections to this change?
Dan?
Thanks, Chair. Given the domestic scale and nature of it, we haven't consulted the chief fire officer or the police. We've consulted the highways, who obviously, given the impact on the adopted highway, and they've commented that they've got no objections in terms of access or highway safety. Officers on that view are happy with the advice of our highways team.
Well, can I just say, Chair? I mean, I don't have any difficulty with this application, but it would have been very helpful to members if, given the nature of the complaints being made, that contact had been made with the emergency services.
Yeah, that'll be noted, Councillor James. If there's no further debate, there's no indications there, we'll go to the vote. So it's for, against or abstain approval of this application. So it's for, against or abstain approval.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much, Chair. Can we start with Councillor Christopher Akers-Belcher?
For.
Councillor Brown?
For.
Councillor Buchan?
For.
Councillor Fleming?
For.
Councillor Howson?
For.
Councillor James?
For.
Councillor Brewer?
For.
Councillor Carl Richardson?
For.
Councillor Tony Richardson?
For.
Councillor Stokel?
For.
And Councillor Young?
For. I think that's unanimous, Joe. So that application has been approved. Number 6 is 1 Greystones Cottage, and I believe it's Dan again to take this report.
Thank you, Chair. This item's page 84 of your handout, members. The site relates to 1 Greystones Cottage on Queensbury Avenue. The location of the property is shown on page 84, as denoted here, with the property facing eastwards. Both the relevant planning history and the site context for the application site are set out within the committee report. In terms of what is proposed, planning permission is sought to make alterations to the roof of the property by removing an existing dormer window on the front elevation, as denoted here, as well as other internal works to alter ceiling heights, and furthermore, the installation of windows to the front elevation and alterations to windows and the roof lights in the rear elevation. A number of the works do not require planning permission, but are shown on the submitted plans, in particular the elevation plan on page 87, which I will now move through. So this is the existing elevations, front and rear, with floor plans. And the main proposed changes are the removal of this dormer window, which was a more recent addition in any event, and the addition of new first floor windows facilitated by internal works to lower the ceiling height. Further works to the rear include alterations to the fenestration in this area here, as well as blocking up of a number of windows and installation of this roof light above the garage. In terms of publicity, the application was advertised in the usual way, and 3 objections have been received from neighbouring properties, as detailed within the report. It's since been noted that one of the neighbouring letters sent had not reached the intended occupier due to an error in the details held for the property. Notwithstanding this, the application was publicised via a site notice, and therefore all legal requirements are being met. Whilst the resident concerned has also contacted the council to confirm that they are aware of the planning application and that they have no concerns or objections. Responses from technical consultees are detailed within the committee report, and in summary, there are no objections raised. Turning to the main planning considerations identified in the report, the dormer which is proposed to be removed would result in the roof line of the property being returned to its original form, and these works are not considered to be detrimental to the character of the property, the surrounding street scene, or the setting of neighbouring listed building to the west. Although concerns are being raised about the proposed windows in the front elevation in terms of the appearance of the building from a conservation perspective and in terms of the potential impacts on the privacy of neighbouring properties opposite, these works could be carried out without the need for planning permission, irrespective of the outcome of this application. For the reasons detailed in the report, it's considered that it would be unreasonable to refuse the application on this basis, and that such works represent a fallback position. Whilst objections have also been received regarding disruption and limited car parking during construction works, the council's traffic and transport section have been consulted and have raised no objections. It's therefore considered that the development is in accordance with the relevant local and national planning policy for the reasons detailed in the report, and therefore the application is recommended for approval subject to the conditions identified in the report. As set out in the report, where the proposal doesn't meet local plan policy distances, justification is sought in respect of such work, the impact of such works being undertaken under permitted development, and therefore this represents a material consideration. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the officer? No indications. We, I believe, do have the applicant, Mr. Andy West.
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee.
Hello.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear. Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay, good morning, everyone. Prior to submitting the planning application, we did engage in detailed discussions with an architect to update the design of Greystones Cottage for the following reasons. It was to replace a steep existing stairway, which is a health and safety hazard for the family. We wanted to generate additional height in the majority of bedrooms to maximise headroom and storage options. We want to provide improved insulation and reduce our carbon footprint. We want to optimise the space of the upper floor level, rearrange existing bathrooms to improve drainage options, and, as already highlighted, restore the property to its original appearance following the addition of a roof dormer under planning permission of a previous owner in the 1990s. The property is located in an urban setting with properties to the front, rear and sides of the dwelling. There are a number of windows currently in the property, and each outlook is of one or more of the surrounding houses, And this is no different to all the other properties located in Queensberry Avenue. Some houses on the street, particularly those opposite the front of Greystones Cottage, have windows at the sides which look directly into windows of neighbouring properties and appear to be in the region of 3 to 5 metres apart, as probably noted on page 84 of the document previously shown. The addition of 3 further windows to the front of the property, it doesn't offer significantly new views of any of the properties to the front of the house, all of which can already be seen from other windows on the east elevation. The proximity of the new windows to the neighbouring properties are no different to those already located on this elevation. Probably the most intrusive outlook currently to the neighbouring properties on this eastern elevation is from the kitchen window directly above the sink. This is during activities such as food preparation and washing up. The new proposed design relocates the kitchen to an area of the house with no eastern outlook and therefore will afford more privacy to the properties in question. To limit disruption to the immediate neighbourhood, we aim to keep building activities outside of the property to a minimum level and avoid organising deliveries during commuting hours and night times. As most of the work is internal, the prospect of dirt and noise outside of the property will be negligible. I respectfully request approval for this predominantly internal work scope. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the applicant? No indications. I believe we have an objector to speak, Mrs. Philippa Nuttall.
Hello, good morning. Good morning, Chair and members of the Planning Committee. My name is Philippa Nuttall. I'm a resident of 21 Queensberry Avenue, along with my family. However, I also represent Mr. and Mrs. Featherstone of 23 Queensberry Avenue and Mr. and Mrs. Clapman of 25 Queensberry Avenue, who have asked me to represent them on their behalf on our reasons for objection to this application. Firstly, we are objecting to the unacceptable invasion of privacy. All 3 properties will be severely overlooked with the addition of these windows to the front of the proposed property and with the lowering of the original dormer window. It will make 5 windows in total looking directly into our properties. These windows will overlook not only our living space, but also our private sleeping space. Greystones is also situated at that of an elevated position, so therefore it looks down on all of our 3 properties. All our properties are situated at the narrowest point of the street, making it extremely close, and with no front garden to Greystones, it makes it already easy to look into our properties from close proximity. The additional lowering of the floors, which is proposed by Greystones, we believe this will make it even more intrusive. Each window will have direct viewing access into both living and sleeping space, and this was shown in the photographs which I took from both living and bedroom space and forward to the council. My house in particular has 2 extremely large bay windows of 14 feet in width on both living and sleeping space. There is no point in these rooms that the residents of Greystones will not be able to see into, and with these additional windows. This, I believe, is extreme and an unacceptable invasion of privacy. This is also the same for Mr. and Mrs. Featherstone at 23 Queensberry Avenue. We feel we will not be comfortable in our own living space if this was to go ahead. Our second objection is to that of Highway. After speaking to Mr. West, we understand he is wanting to start the project as soon as possible. We would like the committee to be aware that there is also another major renovation project taking place next door, which is due to complete by the summer of 2021. Parking is extremely bad and challenging at the best of times in Queensberry Avenue. Drives are often blocked and double park. We believe to run 2 projects at the same time would be horrendous and unacceptable for all residents. Again, photographic evidence was submitted to show the current problem. We also feel from a health and safety perspective, this would be intrusive also. Based on these objections, we ask you to reject the current application. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any questions for the objector? No indication. There are no ward councillors to speak on this application. We'll go to general. Oh, sorry, Councillor Carl Richardson. Councillor Carl Richardson, did you want to speak?
Yes, I didn't want to speak really. I'm not speaking necessarily as a ward councillor, but I would hope that the committee does go against this on the basis that it will be an infringement on people's property. And I also think this is an historic building, and I don't really think that the sort of proposals that they're making are going against that particular principle as well, which we are supposed to be, in some respects, upholding in certain areas. And certainly in Greystones, it shouldn't be altered the way they're proposing. So I would hope the committee would throw this out.
Dan James?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Maybe of assistance to members. In terms of the impact on the conservation area and the listed build, or certainly on the listed building, sorry, the impact has been considered in close detail by the Council's Heritage and Countryside Officer Manager, and on balance, there isn't a conservation objection or an impact on the listed building. As I sort of alluded to a number of times in my presentation, a number of the works could be done tomorrow without requiring planning permission. I speak hypothetically, and the same resultant impacts would occur. So if this application was refused, the applicant could undertake a number of the works without requiring planning permission, and officers are of the view that those resultant works would have the same impact, and therefore that does represent a material consideration as a fallback position. Officers fully acknowledge that the distances don't meet the distances we would expect under local plan policy, and the reasons for that are set out in the report. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Carl Richardson, do you want to come back, or you?
No, it's best if I don't.
Okay. Any further general debate? Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Just a bit of clarification, really. The proposed elevations that I've got, I seem to have, a sketch of proposed elevation, and I've got a photograph of existing elevation. But to me, although there are going to be more windows, there already is windows there. So presumably, if anybody was particularly wanting to overlook properties, they can do that anyway.
Okay. Any further general debate? No. Okay, this application has been recommended for approval by officers. So it's 4 against or abstain approval, and we'll go to the vote, please. Jo.
Thank you very much, Chair. Start with Councillor Christopher Akers-Belcher.
For.
Councillor Brown.
For.
Councillor Buchan.
For.
Councillor Fleming.
For.
Councillor Howson.
Against.
Councillor James.
For.
Councillor Brewer.
For.
Councillor Carl Richardson.
Against, and could I have my name recorded, please?
Absolutely. Yep. Councillor Tony Richardson.
For.
Councillor Stokel.
For.
And Councillor Young.
For.
That's approved, Chair.
Okay, that's approved. Thank you very much. We'll move on to item number 7.
Yeah, can we have 5 minutes?
Yes, if you would like 5 minutes, no problem. We'll have 5 minutes.
We're live, Chair.
Thanks very much. Okay, so we'll resume the meeting now, and it's item number 7, Briarmead High Street in Greetham, and it's Dan bringing this report.
Thank you, Chair. The item begins at page 91 of the PowerPoint and that of members' handout. The site relates to Briarmead, a detached Grade 2 listed building located within the Greetham Conservation Area. Members will note that there is a further application relating to the site on today's committee agenda for an associated listed building consent. Turning to the proposal, planning permission is sought for the erection of a single-storey rear extension. The works would require the removal of a protected tree. The proposal is set out in full within paragraph 7.9 of the committee report. Moving through the PowerPoint slides, this is the existing layout of the property. The proposed extension would be located in this area here, with the tree to be removed in this, approximately in this location. The following slide shows the existing elevations with the proposed. As discussed further in the presentation and it's out in the report, amendments were sought to replicate a more appropriate window detailing to this rear elevation. An amended plan was submitted to address the comments of the Council's Heritage and Countryside Manager. Again, a side elevation, and finally an aerial or a roof plan. This is the proposed extension in question. In terms of the site context, that's out in full within the committee report. The slide on the presentation at the moment shows the existing rear elevation, again with a view onto the side elevation, and given the vicinity or proximity of this tree, it would need to be removed as part of the proposal. That's out in full within the report, and a replacement tree within the grounds, a native species, would be required by way of condition should the application be approved. Finally, further views to the rear elevation. It's these windows here, which obviously will be lost as part of the proposal that we've sought to seek replication within the rear elevation of the new extension. Relevant planning history set out within the report. The application has been referred to Planning Committee as more than 2 objections have been received in line with the Council scheme of delegation. The application has been advertised in the usual manner set out in the report. No objections have been received from neighbouring properties. In terms of consultations, no objections have been received from technical consultees, as detailed within the committee report. However, objections have been received from Greetham Parish Council, the Hartlepool Rural Neighbourhood Plan Group and the Civic Society, primarily on the grounds of the impact on the listed building and the conservation area. These objections are set out in full within the committee report. Turning to the main planning considerations that are identified in the report, the Council's Heritage and Countryside Manager is being consulted, and whilst initial concerns were raised regarding the design of the windows to serve the proposed extension, including the loss of the 2 original windows that served the kitchen, the applicant has submitted an amended detail which shows the windows to be more in keeping with the existing dwelling. Accordingly, the Council's Heritage and Countryside Manager raises no objection to the proposal, subject to large-scale details being provided, which can be secured by a condition. Whilst the concerns of the Parish Council, Rural Plan Group and the Civic Society are noted, for the reasons detailed within the report, it's considered that the proposal will not impact upon the setting, character and appearance of the listed building and the conservation area, and that the proposal does comply with relevant local plan, rural plan policies, as well as the relevant provisions of the National Planning Policy Framework. Furthermore, the application is considered to be acceptable with respect to neighbouring amenity and privacy, visual amenity and all of the relevant material plan considerations, including the impact on trees and archaeology, subject to the appropriate and identified planning conditions in the report. With respect to any residual matters, these are being considered and addressed within the report. In summary, the application is considered to be acceptable and is therefore recommended for approval, subject to the conditions in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Dan. Any questions for the officer? No, we do have the applicant with us, Mr. Kevin Wright.
Hi there, thanks for the time to talk. Morning all.
You've got 4 minutes.
Thank you. So with regards to the tree removal, I engaged with Derek Wardle, the Council's Agricultural Officer, who visited the site before the plans were finalised and submitted. Had concerns with which he concurred with, that the tree is already too close to the property and has caused some damage, and indeed roots are showing signs of heaving the patio and have caused damage to the drainage both in mine and neighbouring property. This is an existing issue regardless of the proposed extension. I suggested to Derek that we could plant an alternative tree elsewhere if the application was successful, and this is a condition of the application. Generally, I've owned the property for over a decade now and have made significant restoration and repairs, including engaging with Hartlepool Heritage Manager from the start to repair and replace rotting windows to the northeast elevation, replacement of roofing, lead and cast iron guttering to reverse water ingress damage to the property. Also a whole host of internal addition in keeping with the original style of the house. I have researched the historic nature of the property to ensure any modifications or repairs are carried out, ensuring retention of original character and use of suitable materials. The reality is that this type of property, in order to be maintained for future generations, needs an owner that is prepared to commit to a long-term investment allocated to looking after the property properly. Prior to our ownership, the property had changed hands several times and some questionable repairs had been carried out, which have since been remedied by myself. The property does have significant historical relevance as detailed in the heritage statement, but it's important to understand that the property was designed and built primarily as a family home and has been and remains a family home first and foremost. The proposed extension is without doubt an enhancement to family living while retaining original character. Webb designed properties to work from the inside, which explains the asymmetric external nature of his designs. That is exactly what I'm doing with the proposed kitchen extension. This house doesn't work as well as I would want it for day-to-day family living, and this is the fundamental reason for the proposed changes. I've looked at and considered the house design in detail, along with my architect, and believe that this area is the best place to enhance the property with minimal impact to its original design and overall character. I accept and agree with all 6 of the conditions put in place should the application be approved. The original submitted plans were not intended to show exact details of the window design. It was always the intention to bring the original fenestration forward as much as possible. In counter to some of the reasoning in the objections, there is a distinct commonality between all 3 objections. And indeed, there are common persons within all 3 organisations that have submitted objections. In my opinion, they form just 1 objection, not 3. With regards to policies HU1, HU3 and HU4, this proposal enhances the use of the property and is a sympathetic alteration and has little or no effect to the conservation area, therefore wholly satisfies these policies. There were no objections from neighbours who are all actually most welcoming of the proposed extension. The objections refer to potential original internal fittings that will be removed. I will say that there are no internal fittings original. The existing kitchen consists of a rundown 1980s country style fitted kitchen with architects to all walls and ceilings and a non-original brick-clad fireplace and non-original damaged range. It is intended to install internal panelling in the extension in the simple arts and crafts style to match original panelling in other areas of the house. In relation to the proposed doors and windows, the original windows and doors in the house consist of various designs such as fixed leaded windows, vertical sash, Yorkshire sash, and side hinged opening.
Afraid that's time, Mr. Wright. Apologies. Okay. we have a strict 4-minute rule, so I'm going to have to cut you short there. So I'm afraid.
Could I just ask Mike, would I be coming back to the second application to finish off?
That is a great question. Yes, is the answer to that, because there are 2 applications, so you can finish off in the second application if you wish to.
Thank you very much.
No problem at all.
That's right, Mr. Chairman.
Now I've got members who are saying we just let him finish now. Okay, no worries. Any questions for the applicant? No hands raised. Okay, no indications. We've got no objector here today. No ward councillors to talk on it. General debate. No general debate. The application is recommended by officers for approval, so it's for, against or abstain approval, and we'll go to the vote, please. Jo.
Thank you very much, Chair. Councillor Christopher Akers-Belcher. Oh, it appears Councillor Christopher Akers-Belcher has left us. Councillor Brown.
For.
Councillor Buchan.
For.
Councillor Fleming.
For.
Councillor Howson.
Against.
Councillor James.
For.
Councillor Brewer.
For.
Councillor Carl Richardson.
Against.
Councillor Tony Richardson.
For.
Councillor Stokel.
For.
And Councillor Young.
For. That application is approved. We'll go to item 8, which again is Briarmead High Street in Greetham, and it's Dan bringing this report as well.
Thank you, Chair. The item begins on page 91 of the PowerPoint that of members' handout, as per the previous item. The site relates to Briarmead, a detached Grade 2 listed building located within Greetham Conservation Area. This application relates to a listed building consent application for the same works considered under the previous agenda item. Listed building consent is sought for the erection of a single-storey extension to the rear, and the proposal is set out in full within paragraph 8.9 of the report. The site context and background are also set out in the report. The application has been advertised in the usual manner, and no objections have been received from neighbouring properties. In terms of technical consultees, no objections have been received as detailed within the report. However, and as per the application for full planning permission, objections have been received from the Parish Council, Hartlepool Rural Neighbourhood Plan Group and the Civic Society. These objections are set out in full within the report. The main considerations of the application are set out in the report, to which the Council's Heritage and Countryside Manager has been consulted, and the matters of the original concerns raised have been satisfactorily addressed. Accordingly, the Council's Heritage and Countryside Manager raises no objection to the proposal, subject to large-scale details being provided, which can be secured by condition. The proposal is also considered to be acceptable in respect of any of the relevant material planning considerations as detailed in the report. In summary, the application is therefore recommended for approval, subject to the conditions identified in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Dan, rather. Not thank you, Chair, just repeat what you said there. Thank you, Dan. The officer is open to questions, but I imagine there won't be because it's similar or exactly the same as the last application in some respects in terms of the report. Mr. Wright, do you want to finish your contribution?
Thanks.
Go for it.
Yeah, it won't take long. So just the last little section there, just I want to say this. Section in the objections states that the original facade along with rear door and entrance lobby along with the proportion and rhythm will be totally lost. In fact, the rear door was an addition in 1983, which is referred to the previous planning application HLBC 005683 and did not exist prior to that date. Originally, there was no rear door, and the entrance lobby referred to in the objection that would be completely lost was actually an enclosed internal larder. I have original layout plans as part of my own research in the house's history. In essence, I'm proposing to update and improve an area of the house that has already been updated and changed from original design in the 1980s. Thanks for the time to speak.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for the applicant? None. We'll go straight to general debate. No general debate. The application is recommended for approval, so it's for, against, or abstain approval, and we'll go to the vote, please, Joe.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Brown.
For.
Councillor Buchan.
For.
Councillor Fleming.
For.
Councillor Howson.
Against.
Councillor James.
For.
Councillor Brewer.
For.
Councillor Carl Richardson.
Against.
Councillor Tony Richardson.
For.
Councillor Stokel.
For.
And Councillor Young.
For. That application is approved. Number 9, 1 Woodbine Terrace in Greetham, and again, this is Dan, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just load the presentation.
No problem.
Thank you, Chair. The item begins on page 102 of the PowerPoint and that of members' handout. The site relates to 1 Woodbine Terrace located within Greetham Conservation Area. Retrospective planning permission is sought for the installation of 2 UPVC windows to the ground floor of the property, replacing the previous shopfront windows and associated detailing. The proposal is set out in full within paragraph 9.5 of the committee report. Moving through the slides within the PowerPoint, slide 103 on the screen at the moment shows the unauthorised windows as installed in which relates to these two windows here in the side elevations. Slide 104 shows the lower photo shows the applicants indicated or the suggested proposals to add a window bar and a arch. And this is a mock-up showing what they would indicate to do to address officer concerns.
Sorry for interrupting, Chair. Are we supposed to be seeing a slideshow at the moment? Nothing's showing up on my screen.
Yeah, yes, Councillor Brew, you certainly are supposed to be seeing a slideshow. Can you unshare and share again, do you think? Yeah. Thanks, Dan. We'll try again, James.
Thank you, Chair.
Can you see that?
No, just Daniel's all signed.
Right, okay, so have you got your A3 pack?
Yeah.
Go to 102 in your A3 pack.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Sorry,
you'll just have to follow it from there. Go ahead, Dan.
Can everyone else see?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay, so this is the site in question. 103 shows the windows as installed, the unauthorised UPVC windows, which are these two in the side elevations of the property. This is further photos of the installed unauthorised windows on page 104 of the handout. The image at the bottom of the screen shows the applicant suggested, it's a mock-up of the applicant's suggestions to add a arch to the top and a central window bar, but that's only a proposal. Slide 105 is a historic photo showing the original window detail, and as you can see, there's the integral detail of the window frame with the arch and the different window bars. This page 106 shows a Google Street View image of the original shop front circa October 2010. Again, shows some of the detailing to the windows. And finally, slide and page 107 shows further photos of the original window detailing. The site context is set out in full within the committee report. The relevant planning history is set out in the report, and the application has been referred to planning committee due to the retrospective nature of the application and the officer recommendation in line with the council scheme of delegation. The application has been advertised in the usual manner and no objections have been received from neighbouring properties. Responses from technical consultees are detailed within the committee report, including an objection from the council's heritage and countryside manager. Turning to the main planning considerations set out in the report, the relevant identified local plan policies, rural plan policies, and those of the NPPF are set out within the report. Further to this strong framework of policies is the council's shopfront and commercial frontages design supplementary planning document, which states that where historic shopfronts exist, these should be refurbished as original detailing can not only enhance the individual building, but also contribute to the character of the area. Furthermore, it notes that the finishing materials should be chosen to complement the design of the surrounding property. The predominant materials used for windows within Greetham Conservation Area is timber. The proposal is a retrospective application for the installation of 2 UPVC windows to the ground floor of the building. The windows had previously been the display windows of a shop and featured pilasters either side with a fascia over framing the openings. The council's heritage and countryside manager considers that the proposed replacement UPVC windows would cause less than substantial harm to the significance of Greetham Conservation Area as a result of the loss of the original timber windows combined with the other relevant elements that provided a traditional shopfront. Furthermore, no information has been provided to demonstrate that this identified harm would be outweighed by any public benefits of the proposal. The applicant was made aware of the officer concerned as outlined in this presentation. The applicant provided some information to seek to address the concerns raised, namely by providing or suggesting to provide the addition of further detailing to the windows, consisting of arches above the windows and the application of window bars. However, as set out in further comments from the council's heritage and countryside manager in the report, it's considered that the additional works would not address the identified level of harm to the designated heritage asset, as the previous arches were an integral part of the frame and quite slim, whereas the applicant's proposals are deeper and appear as a separate element to the windows. As such, it's considered that the proposal is not considered to be acceptable, and this would warrant a refusal of the application. In summary, it's considered that the development is not in accordance with local or rural plan policies or that of the National Planning Policy Framework. It's therefore recommended that the application be refused. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Dan. Any questions for the officer? applications. I don't think that we've got an applicant or an objector for this today, so we will go straight into general debate. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. I think the image with the UPVC showing the arches and the bar across the cross section of the middle doesn't look too out of keeping, in my opinion, with what the existing was. We reach this point every other meeting, Chair, of a reluctance to be allowing UPVC within our town. It was brought up just a couple of meetings ago. It was going to be addressed that we would actually look at our policy, Chair, because there's confusion here. We never seem to, our officers never seem to allow anything with UPVC, yet we have a policy that says it is acceptable. That's it, Chair. Thank you.
Councillor Fleming.
While agreeing with everything that Paddy says, I can't see a problem at all with UPVC. It's not a shop. It used to be a shop. It's somebody's house now, and I would support the windows with the amendments being put on.
Councillor Carl Richardson.
Yes, Chair. I think it's always been a controversial matter, this, within the planning committee. And when the officer was talking about the character of the area, I think you can see on one of the photographs where other people have used UPVC as well in some of the other houses. And I think the person that's doing this is trying to be in keeping with the historical nature of the house. So they are trying, and I think we should maybe understand that and be in the modern world now. You know, past are the days when we had a situation where we had paint with lead in it and it lasted a long time. We're a seaside resort. We've got salt in the air. You'd have to paint the houses every 6 months if everything was done with wood. You know, it's a question of trying to keep with the character of the area, not necessarily to have wood. And I think you maybe should look at other places like York, for instance, which is an historical town, but they don't have this sort of problem that we seem to have on UPVCs.
Councillor James.
Well, a lot of what I was going to say has been said, Chair. The fact is that there is no difficulty for members with the policy. It's our policy. There does seem to be a little bit of a difficulty in the way that it's interpreted by officers. And it is a constant running survey, basically. Our policy, and I was party to it when we made it, is that we do accept UPVC replacements for wooden windows where it is appropriate and it can be shown that UPVC can look the same, which actually means it's more expensive than something that just comes off the shelf as a UPVC unit. They normally have to be handmade, and they are made to look like wood or stone or wherever else it might be. So I don't personally have a problem with the application, and so long as the archways are put in and the central bar is put in, then I would be quite happy to accept it.
Councillor Buchan.
I agree entirely with what Marjorie's just said. If the archways are put in place and the bar, I think they're entirely in a setting. Nobody driving past would notice. They just wouldn't notice the difference.
Okay, Dan.
Yeah, just to clarify a point that Councillor Fleming said, Chair, the property in question doesn't, the last known authorised use is a shop. In the background to the report, it sets out that there is an unauthorised change of use to a dwelling, and that officers are pursuing a planning application for that. So it isn't a dwelling as such.
Can I ask a question based on that answer then, Chair?
Absolutely.
Because I would have thought that if there was a clear breach, i.e. unauthorised alterations, that would be dealt with before an application came in for planning. So in some ways, I feel as if we've got it the wrong way around. The actual enforcement issue should have been dealt with before an application was submitted.
Dan?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Obviously, there's two elements to this. It's understood that the property isn't, from my discussions with the case officer, the property hasn't been occupied as such as yet, but the works have commenced internally. We wrote to the applicant and we've asked for the requisite planning application. It was their prerogative whether they chose to submit an application for a change of use and the windows, or chose to submit the two different elements. As I understand it, that the applicant is waiting to see the outcome of this application before they choose whether they're going to pursue submitting a planning application. But in any event, officers will continue to pursue seeking that application. If it isn't forthcoming, the matter will need to be referred back to Planning Committee for further consideration, and that's set out in full within the background of the report.
Yeah. Councillor Brewer.
Thank you, Chair. Just a slight question then. If the applicant is waiting to see the results of this before pursuing turning it into an actual dwelling, does that mean that without these windows it will be unfit as an actual dwelling for the occupant?
Can't comment. You wouldn't be able to comment on another application, I don't think.
Fair enough.
Chair, can I suggest that we actually defer a decision on this item pending the outcome of enforcement action, and sort of bring this person to the table?
Motion's been put. Is there a seconder for that motion?
I'll second it.
Councillor Buchan has seconded it. Can we go to the vote, please, Joe?
Yes, Chair, thank you very much. Councillor Brown.
For.
Councillor Buchan.
For.
Councillor Fleming.
For.
Councillor Howson.
For.
Councillor James.
For.
Councillor Brewer.
For.
Councillor Carl Richardson.
For.
Councillor Tony Richardson.
For.
Councillor Stokel.
For.
Councillor Young.
For. That's deferred until enforcement action is taken regarding the unauthorised use of the property. Jim. You could if we could hear you. What's the point that you want to make?
No, turn that round.
Sorry, members, my headset's not working for some reason today. I just want to clarify what members are requiring here, because in two ways we can chase the applicant for an application for the house, for the conversion of the shop to a house, and then bring that application and this application back to committee. Or we can, if we don't get an application, we can bring an enforcement paper back to committee and this application.
Well, Jim, if it helps, I think that we're actually trying to cut that down in the timeline. And I think that the indication that members are giving is that they would be minded to support enforcement action if that is the only way of making sure that this person who's trying to develop this property and change its usage would come to the table and actually act in a sensible manner. So in some ways, we're sort of cutting the timeline quite significantly, because we'd be quite happy for officers to go back to this individual and say that we are minded to not support the application until such time as he or she is prepared to actually put in an application properly and that takes into account the requirements for a change of use.
Yeah, okay, so we're going to ask for the application and make that clear that that's what members want.
Dan?
Thanks, Chair. Just officers have pursued this for a long time, so if post this meeting we give the applicant a set deadline to get the valid application to us, because that's part of the problem. People submit an application but it's never valid first time. If that's not valid within an appropriate timescale, we'll bring the matter back to committee.
That's fine. Yeah, I think Councillor James made a great point, and the motion carried for that reason. So yeah, that's exactly how I understand it. Unless Councillor James has anything to say to it.
No, I think that's fine, Chair, and I think that if and when the report does come back to members, if they have not made the correct application under guidance from officers, then that needs to be said to remind members, because I might not be there, to remind members of what's actually occurred in today's meeting and why we've reached that decision.
Okay.
And I mean, to be fair, none of the members might be here because they've got an election to face.
Noted. Item 5 and 5.1 is an update on current complaints. Can I ask members to address officers directly if they've got issues on that list?
Chair, can I raise a question about objections and issues? I had actually a reason to actually pass Serpentine Road a couple of days ago. And if you remember, when we did have proper site visits, we went to a property on Serpentine and made comments about how it would look from the main road itself. And to be fair, it looks an eyesore to me. They've built an internal wall quite well back, and there is nothing between the wall and the front curtilage of the pavement at all. It's just a setback white wall. So in my opinion, none of the issues that we raise have been taken into account, and so whether he's just not finished it, I don't know, but I would like officers to make an inspection.
Yeah, we'll sort that out. Thanks, Councillor James. I've got 1 point of any other business, if members will allow. Tom Graham has been our barrister for some time now, and in my view, he's been an excellent addition to the team. Unfortunately, Tom has needed to step down from that position, and I just wanted to voice a word of thanks to Tom for his sound advice over the past few months. He's certainly given me a dose of confidence that I otherwise wouldn't have had. And he is that kind of chap, and we've had a previous conversation before this statement. So yeah, thanks very much, Tom. It's been great to have you on board, and sad to see you leaving. So yeah, all the very best for the future. Tom will be getting replaced by a barrister called Alex Strickland, and I'm going to allow Tom to come in if he wants to say something.
No, that's thank you very much, Chairman. I think the only thing I can cite in response is the learned Vinnie Jones, who said it's been emotional. So
for all of us, Tom, for all of us.
Can I just say, Chair, to be fair, I mean, I think Tom's been a good officer really in the round, and I have crossed swords with him occasionally, as I do with most legal advisors. But to be fair, he is a legal advisor that can actually say yes and no.
Yes,
which is a breath of fresh air.
Absolutely, I've appreciated that.
Yes, I will be missing being put right by Councillor James.
It happens
They'll all be in the same boat in a few weeks, Tom, so you'll just be part of the crowd.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd just like to compliment Tom's input over the last period as well, and wish you well for the future, Tom. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks very much. Okay, we do have some exempt items, so we do need to move into closed session. Can I get a proposer for the closed session, please?
I'll propose it.
Thanks, Councillor Brewer, and a seconder.
Seconded.
Councillor James. We'll move into closed session. Can we turn the live stream off, please?